Hello and welcome to Book List. I'm Nancy Pearl. My guest today at University Bookstore is novelist and memoir writer Isabel Allende. Isabel, it is such a pleasure to see you again after these many years. You're starting off on a tour.
With laryngitis.
With laryngitis. Yeah. And it's a tour for your brand new
for
novel, for Maya's Notebook. And I wanted to start our conversation by talking about that particular book as how, in many ways, how different it is from your earlier titles.
I had been writing historical novels for quite a while. I got bored with the idea of the research, heavy-duty research. For my latest novel, Island Beneath the Sea, I researched 4 years. And it was about slavery and abuse of power and war and massacres. It was just a horrible research. Mm-hmm. So I wanted something lighthearted. And I decided to write about what was happening in my life at that moment. All my grandchildren and their friends were teenagers. Mm-hmm. It didn't come out so lighthearted.
Yeah,
after
that's
all.
right. I was going to say.
But it has redemption, and
yes.
It's a book that for me was very entertaining to write, because I was hearing the voices of my grandchildren. People ask me, how at your age you can get the voice of a 19-year-old girl from Berkeley? Well, because I was surrounded by them.
Yes.
And
that's part of being an artist, is a writer, is to put yourself in other people's skin.
Of course, you are each one of the characters.
Right.
If I could be a slave in Haiti 200 years ago, I can be a teenager in Berkeley.
That's right. As you were writing it, you had to do a little bit of research for this, because were you familiar? The book in the present is set on an island, part of an archipelago off of Chile, which is fascinating. I mean, when I read it, I had to look it up and see where it was and what I could read about it. So were you familiar with that from your childhood? Or?
Not from my childhood. Chiloé, that archipelago, was pretty disconnected from the continent for many reasons for many years. But now, of course, it's part of Chile completely. And I have friends who have moved there. They retired there, or they move if they can, because it's wonderful. It has a lousy weather most of the year, and life is not that easy. Mm-hmm. And there are many problems. It's not paradise. But I needed something to contrast the artificial world of Vegas, the gambling, prostitution, money, entertainment, lights all over. I needed to contrast that, and I thought that Chiloé was the perfect contrast. Mm-hmm. And I had been there many times, but I wanted to find the perfect island among the many islands.
Yes.
And so I went with my daughter-in-law, my son, and my husband. We went and spent some time with a very good guide who taught us the mythology of the place, who took us around. We found the island. We researched well. And it was very interesting, because some scenes in the book, I didn't have to invent them. There's, for example, a reunion of young women who call themselves the witches, and they gather on full moon in a sort of kiva, in a ruca. Uh-huh. We were invited, my daughter-in-law and I. And so I just transcribed what I lived. It was wonderful.
One of the most moving parts for me of the book, and I think one of the redemptive parts, is Maya's relationship with her Nini and her Popo.
Yeah. And this girl has no parents to speak of. Right. And she is raised by her grandparents. Nini, who is a Chilean immigrant, she's exactly like me. Mean, tough. Yeah. And a wonderful Popo, who is an African-American astronomer in Berkeley. And he's a large man, larger than life, who accepts her unconditionally, adores her. And I think that if a person can grow up adored like that, you have the foundation for everything in life.
Yes.
I never had it. I had a wonderful grandfather, But my grandfather was a tough Basque, and nothing was enough for him. Discipline, performance, best grades, push yourself to the limit. That was the message I received as a child. I was never cuddled.
I think that because I had a similar kind of relationship with parents and grandparents, and that's, I think, why I was so moved by her.
Well, in the book, it's the love of these grandparents that sustains her and saves her when she's in the worst part of hell. There's a moment in the book when she's dying. She's in a public bathroom, almost overdosing, and she's dying. And the ghost of her grandfather comes and talks to her. Is it her imagination, her memory? Is it what he has given her before? We don't know. It doesn't matter.
Right.
The fact is that she always has with her those people who adore her.
When you look back at your earlier books and the amount of magic realism that you wove into those, there's still magic realism in this book. So
well, because of the mythology of the island.
Exactly.
I didn't make it up.
And the mythology was fascinating, and the way it gets translated and kind of reworked from generation to generation as the stories get told. I thought Manuel's,
Manuel's life.
His life, and Manuel is the person who the main character goes to stay with on the island, an old friend of her grandmother's.
Yeah,
so.
And the reader and Maya don't know why this hermit, this guy who lives in a house without doors, who doesn't want to see anybody, would receive an American teenager in trouble. Why would he do that?
Right.
So there is an explanation at the end of the book.
Yeah.
Don't say it.
No, I won't. Yeah. I won't say a word. Why do you think that magical realism, which I like to call elastic realism, because I think it takes real situations and draws them out in different stretchy directions, but why do you think it's so pervasive in Latin American fiction?
Nancy, it's perversive in life. In the United States, people hang crystals around their necks. They believe in astronomers and psychics and therapists and gurus and whatever. It's the same thing without a name. When it happens in the United States, it's sort of acceptable. When it happens somewhere else, oh, that's superstition, magical. Here it's religion.
Now you sound just like Nini sounds.
Well, I am Nini.
You are. I always thought, though, because that is, of course, true about, we have so much superstition in our life. And,
of course, but it's not superstition. It's accepting that the world is a very mysterious place and that we live very mysterious lives and we are not in control of everything. We were talking 5 minutes ago with my daughter-in-law about astrology and about how an astrologer that we have never met has told my husband several times on the phone things that she would never have guessed and that are unique to my husband. Now, do I believe in astrology? I give it the benefit of doubt. Maybe, maybe not. So I don't know why this person in Colorado on the phone can say those things to my husband and they are true. Mm-hmm. I have no idea. But the fact that that happens opens a world of possibilities in life and, of course, in literature.
Right. And when we're talking about American writers, we don't get the level of elastic realism that we get in Latin American writers, and I don't think. I think when we're talking about like literary fiction.
Toni Morrison.
Yeah, Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
And many
totally
others.
Accept. Yeah.
Many
very
others.
much. Yeah.
Especially if they are either African American or Chinese American or something.
Right,
yeah.
because they're bringing those things.
Amy Tan, all of them, they are American, born here.
Yes.
And yet they bring part of their culture in.
Continuing with my theory was because the history of Latin America was so difficult, much of even the recent history, that the only way to understand it was to approach it metaphorically.
There's part of that too. But I think that happens with every tragedy in the world. It is culture, it's art that transforms the event in such a way that we can all understand it and remember it. The Vietnam War. When did America understand what was going on in Vietnam? A snapshot, a photograph of a little girl running like this, and the explosion of napalm behind. That moment was what ignited the anger in the United States. So it's art, in one instant, by chance, that does that. And that's metaphorical, as you say.
I wonder if that's why you, as a writer, value your art, because it has the possibility to transform people's lives.
I don't think that way. I don't think that my books can transform people. Sometimes people tell me that they have learned something or they have had some impact on their lives. I don't know. I just want to tell a story because the story is important to me. And I assume that if it's important to me, it will be important to some other people. But I take a chance, maybe not. Maybe that's not going to happen. When I wrote this book, I was not trying to preach, to teach anybody about addiction or about teenagers or, no. I just would love young people to read it and feel identified with Maya.
Is there going to be an attempt by the marketing department at Harper to aim it toward young adult readers as well as adult readers? Because
I don't know. I
should
ask them.
That would be interesting.
I should ask them.
Yeah.
I don't think they have thought about that.
Yeah, because I know it's the adult department that's that's dealing with this. When we talked, which was I think now about 12 years ago, you told a story that you always began every book on the same day in January.
January 8th.
January 8th.
I still do.
You're still doing that?
I still do, because I need to organize my life. My life is complicated. I have a lot of traveling and many other things aside from writing. So if I can separate a few months of the year, at the beginning of the year, and everybody around me knows that I'm locked away writing, that helps me. It's more discipline now than superstition, both combined. Yeah.
A little more magic realism in your life, the superstition. Do you then, in those months that you're locked away, do you plot the whole book out, or how do you approach that craft?
I approach January 8th with a feeling or a vague idea about something. Sometimes with research. Let's say that I have researched a period of the history of Haiti, but I don't have the characters, I don't have the story. I only know the scenario in which I'm going to move my characters, but nothing else. And then in the process of writing, in the first few weeks, things start to happen, but very slowly. And when I feel that the characters can speak for themselves, that they surprise me with something, then I know the book is going somewhere. And that's a wonderful time, when things start to happen in spite of myself.
And was Maya's notebook, I know you said you really enjoyed writing it, that it was fun. Was there a parts of that book that were harder for you, or that you just sort of felt, I don't want to go any further there?
Yeah. When Maya is homeless and she's stumbling lower and lower into the deepest hell, there was a point when I didn't know if she could be rescued, or if I had gone too far. Of course, I talked to psychiatrists and psychologists and people who specialize in addiction and all that to create a character that was believable. But I had also seen that in my close family, because there's a lot of addiction in my stepchildren. There's a rape scene in the book. It took me a long time to write it, but it was necessary. It is the beginning of hell. And it was just a horrible scene, horrible to imagine it, to imagine the smells, the sounds, the terror, everything.
In some of your other books, were there similar parts?
Yes.
That you...
Yes. In Island Beneath the Sea, which is about slavery, The research made me sick, Nancy. After a couple of years of research, I got what I thought was stomach cancer. The tests were all positive. There was nothing wrong with me. And my husband said, when you finish the book, you'll get better. Because just learning about the horrible things that people can do to other people if they have power and impunity, like a master has with a slave, over a slave, or an abusive father, or the military, or a torturer, or any person who has absolute power and is not accountable for his or her actions can do horrible things. And when you learn that, it's very disturbing. Because I have to ask myself, what would I do if I had lived 200 years ago in a plantation in Haiti and I had slaves? How would I see them? Would I see them as people? Would I understand what was going on? Maybe not. Maybe today we are doing horrible things that in 100 years we will look back and say, my God, people did this or did that. And we think we are so politically correct.
And partly, I think it's because to act against society's dictates is very hard.
Very few people can do it.
Exactly.
Very few people can stand up. There were very few abolitionists at the beginning. There were very few people who could speak for the people who had no voice. Mm-hmm. And today, it's the same with immigrants, it's the same with the guys in Guantanamo. Who's speaking for them? Nobody. And if you do, then you are a traitor.
Yeah.
You are the scum of the society. And you are suspicious, of course.
I think people have always tried to deal, thinking people have always tried to deal with that sense of what is right and what is wrong, and going against what society says is the right thing to do. But I think it's maybe especially important to help teens sort of try to separate themselves
from the peer pressure.
From peer pressure, which is not only peers their own age, but the world.
Yeah.
And I think
we are slaves of fashion, of what people say, of gossip, of so many pressures of every kind. To stand up against that is very hard.
Mary Doria Russell, who is a novelist, she said that it's so easy when you say to somebody, would you have hidden Anne Frank's family if she came to you? Of course we would all say, oh, of course we would.
I lived that.
Yes.
I lived that in Chile at a time when we had horrible repression. If you were caught hiding somebody, you would be tortured, tortured and killed, and maybe your children too. So it's very hard to say, I would do it, because you don't know.
And that in fact most people wouldn't do it.
Wouldn't, of course not. And the most unexpected people would.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that your books have always taught me, or always made me think about, is how people get through their lives in so many different ways. And I think Maya's Notebook did that for me, because there were certainly parts in it when I felt, how could she go on? Hoping that yes, she would, and wondering how she was going to do it.
In a way, Maya is lucky. She had a grandmother like me who saved her.
Yeah, yes.
And many people who helped her.
But I think what you said about that strong foundation, that foundation of love, that's the most important. I mean, I think in the end that's what saved Maya.
In her case,
yes.
But it not always works, Nancy, because you can have 4 or 5 kids in the same family, raised the same way, and some make it and some don't. Yeah. It's also character. It's also luck. Some people have better luck than others.
Yeah, so talk about like good fortune and luck.
Well, in Spanish, it would be the same.
It would be the same
It would
word.
be the same. But I think that we are born with a set of cards. Those cards cannot be changed. Your gender, your nationality, your color, your height, your intelligence, whatever, those are your cards. And you can play that game well or bad, or badly, it depends. Some people ruin the game with the same cards that you can make a successful game. So I do think that we have a saying in our lives that we are in some control but not totally. There's part of it that is luck. The most important things in my life, I have not had any control over them. For example, the military coup in Chile, the fact that I became a political refugee, I had no control. I had control over the fact that I moved to the United States because I fell in lust with a guy. That was my choice, but not the other one. The death of my daughter, did I have any choice on that? No. And those are the things that determine the person you become in time. Most of the time, it's just chance. And sometimes those events are very fortunate. The fact that people liked my first book, and that opened the way for all the other books. That was very lucky. Who could have predicted that? Certainly, I couldn't make it happen.
Right. When you're not writing, are you a reader as well?
Oh, yes. I'm a voracious, disorganized, messy reader, and very impatient reader also. If the book doesn't catch my attention and my imagination at the beginning, I just let it go. I don't force myself to finish it because everybody's saying that it's good. No. I read a lot of fiction, and I have a lovely bookstore near my house, Book Passage. They select readers' copies, manuscripts, whatever, and I get to read the books before they are published often.
Are there some writers that you would recommend, or some novels that you've really
I read all kinds of stuff, and it's hard to recommend. I just finished a book that is recently published. I think now it's being published by Khaled Hosseini, called The Mountains Echoed, I think it is, that I liked very much. I like everything he does. And I read a collection of stories by Nathan Englander. And there is a story there called The Reader that I photocopied, and I have it on my wall because it's a story of a best-selling author 10 years later who can't sell one book and goes alone in a book tour, driving his car with no money even for a sandwich. No one comes to the readings. He's just alone and still obsessed with writing. And that's my future, Nancy. I will be there.
No. Absolutely not.
Of course, it happens in every career, and to writers especially. There's a time when you peak and then nobody remembers your books. How many memorable writers do we have? Very few.
Yeah, and I read yesterday that somebody who won the Pulitzer in 1920 and 1922, Booth Tarkington, I think it was. Nobody reads Booth Tarkington.
Yeah, there must be a cemetery of forgotten books somewhere.
Right, forgotten authors and forgotten books. Well, what about Philip Roth saying that he at 80 is retiring? He's not going to write anymore.
We'll see. We'll see how long that lasts. Because I try to retire too, and it doesn't work.
Let's talk about that.
Because I think that art, writing, it's not something that you choose to do. It's something that happens in spite of yourself. You are burning inside with a story. You have to write it. You have to write it. You can be 90 and no one will read it, and you still have to write it.
And you feel like that's your...
Yeah, I'm telling you, I tried.
Yes.
Well, two things happened. First, the stories were burning inside, and second, my family was fed up with me. They wanted me locked away writing. So I went back to the craft.
And so last January 8th, now a few months in the past, you started another...
I have another book in the oven. It's a thriller that will be published in January in several languages simultaneously. And then I started on January 8th this year, a love story. So I'm always writing something. If I'm not there in front of the computer because I'm traveling, I have it in my mind. And it's like the wheels are turning, and I'm looking at this possibility, no, that doesn't work, this other thing, and whatever. Or researching.
Is the thriller set in the United States?
Yeah, in San Francisco in 2012. So it's last year. Very contemporary. And it's, no, I won't tell you. You will have to read it.
Which I definitely will.
It's called Ripper.
Ripper?
Like Jack the Ripper?
Like Jack the Ripper.
There is a role game that kids play called Ripper. So based on that game, I did the book.
Did you find out about that game from your grandchildren?
Yeah, I saw my granddaughter playing the game. And that got me thinking of all the possibilities.
And I think that that's what readers are always so interested in finding out, is where the germ of an idea for a book began.
You know, it's interesting because some people give me their stories, and they are wonderful stories, and I can't write them because I don't feel that burning thing inside. It's not connected to me somehow. But then I see my granddaughter in the kitchen playing a game, and something sparks inside my head. Why? Something little can be so important. Or something that somebody says in a restaurant, and I overhear from the next table. And oh my God, that's it.
I am the kind of person who, whenever I'm in public, I'm always listening to other people's conversations.
I'm never paying attention to what Willie is saying.
Right.
Because I know what he will say.
Right.
But next table,
there might be a great germ for a story in that. Are there other South American writers, contemporary writers that you read in Spanish that perhaps haven't been translated here?
There are many, even in Chile, new writers that are writing wonderful books. Also in Spain, there's a whole literary movement in Spain, and very few are translated.
It seems to me it says something very sad about the state of American publishing.
I think that it's not only the publishing. Think about the movies. We get very few foreign movies, and they are in special cinemas because the public doesn't like translation.
Right.
And it's very provincial. Only very sophisticated audiences, people who travel, want to know what's going on in the rest of the world. The rest of the country thinks that in the United States is the world. I think they cannot place it in the map because they think it is the map.
And that's the kind of...
But if you think about it, from abroad, we think that the United States is one thing.
Yes.
And it isn't. There are many nations within the nation. There are many United States, many diverse cultures and people.
Right.
And when I came to the United States, that's what my biggest surprise, that I would go to another state and it would be like another country. And I'm always surprised at that, at the fact that people from abroad see, and I consider myself American now, they see us like one thing. Usually the ugly American.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Right.
The ugly tourist.
Right.
Which is not the case at all.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Or they think, for example, that this is such a dangerous country, that you cannot walk in the streets without having somebody kill you because everybody has a gun. All kinds of myths that people think that we are. And they don't know us, as we don't know other people.
Exactly. Isabel, thank you.
Thank you,
so much. This has been just a lovely half hour for me.
Thank you. Thank you.